two eyes, huh? Do you understand the game a bit? Yeah, have a look.
I'm not saying anything to you in particular because I know you're not too accurate with your reporting.
That's what you paid
so you're
for.
Saying I should resign. So you're saying I should resign?
I think
that's
you should,
your opinion. Is that right?
That's my
opinion.
opinion.
Fine.
Are you going to resign then?
No, of course I'm not going to resign.
I simplify things next time.
Hello. It's an emergency, therefore it requires a TNC emergency pod. The Socceroos are through to a final World Cup playoff against Peru on Tuesday morning next week after squeaking past the United Arab Emirates 2-1 thanks to a Ajdin Hrustic wonder volley from the edge of the box that may or may not have taken a massive deflection on its way in. I'm Josh Parish. I've got Joey Lynch and Ante Jukic here with me. If Nick manages to unplug his microwave and work out his microphone issues he's been having, then we'll be joined by Nick DeBano as well. Gentlemen, how are we? How do we pull up after the 4 a.m. start?
All right. Well, I think, to be honest, I think I look like somebody that was up late last night with you, Josh Parish, commentating on the Australia Cup. Apologies, Ante, for Melbourne Knights 4-0 defeat to the Oakley Cannons last night, and then promptly got up at 3:30. Oh,
that's my father.
Oh,
is this the most cynical man in Australian football? My father.
Is this the man with the best eye test in Australian football? This is fantastic.
We didn't plan this.
We did not plan this, but this is amazing. Oh, this is
Can we get
already? Yes.
Why is he leaving? Can we get him as a special guest?
Oh no! I want to hear the deeply cynical but amazing eye test and takes. Anyway, Josh. No,
if you think Ante Jukic is cynical and savage with his football opinions, just imagine his old man.
Oh, I want to hear where all this has sprung from. This is incredible.
I'm sure Ante Jukic will be back in a moment. But yes, Joey, we had a late night last night at Knight Stadium. Quick turnaround for us. It was a pretty brutal morning, and it was only made more brutal by that first half performance.
I think I look like a man that got up at 3:30 in the morning and then watched that first half performance. As Ante, get him on the pod, Ante. We'll set him up with another window where we can get his.
I'll be honest, his English isn't the best. So not working. He hasn't worked on a job site in a while, so his English is kind of gone down. Shout out to my tata, man.
Did he watch the game with you this morning, Ante? Did he have any takes?
No, he didn't. Because I played futsal last night and slept like an absolute king this morning. I was wrecked after playing futsal for the first time in a while, and I had the day off today, so I figured I'd take full advantage of it. Stay off the phone, stay off Twitter, watch the game in peace, and yeah, it's a weird old game, wasn't it?
Well, hold up. What's his thoughts on how Hrvatska are going?
He has very similar thoughts to I do. Kovacic stinks. Dalic is a coward, and we need to give more scope to Mayer and Kramaric.
You know what?
But let's talk Socceroos.
Well, at some point though, we need to get old men on the your dad, my dad. We need to get them all on TNC and do an old man special.
Absolutely. Whose dad is the more influential Australian football voice? That's the big question.
I think, you know what, to be honest, I think my old man would grow very impatient with the old man Michael Lynch with his football opinion. To be honest, if my interactions with the old man are anything to use as a reference point.
That's the first take style spin-off that ESPN has been waiting for.
Can you imagine? What?
Run Their Meme says the interrogation room door open to a wonderful surprise.
There's no spotlight today. There's like light coming into the office today.
This feels wrong, by the way. This feels deeply unnatural to have TNC during daylight hours.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you stay at the club too long and the lights go on at the end of the night, and you go, "What am I doing?
What am I doing here?" Walking out of Revs and going to circus at like 8 in the morning.
So the hangover from this one, Ante, How did you feel? How did you feel about the post match clarity, shall we say, in the in ensuing fallout from this meeting?
This show is like 5 minutes in, and we're already completely off the rails.
I said match.
That was a. I'll be honest though, that was a weird old game. I don't like. I haven't really, like taken in commentary elsewhere, to be honest. But like just having watched the game myself, like making full use of the day off. But yeah, like I don't. Australia weren't great, but it was against an opposition that was, not essentially playing not to lose, and so a lot of their possessions were predicated on taking the sting out of the game and taking the pace out of the game. I guess the one overwhelming positive in this game was how much Hrustic grew into the match. And it was weird. I was at club level. There were few times that he played in like a flat 3 in midfield, and Eintracht Frankfurt played in a 3-5-2. Even within the idea of him not seeing a lot of match minutes at club level. And in that game where they played 3-5-2, he scores almost an exact same goal against Stuttgart. Like you think about the interaction that he had with Jukic in that game where they did play 3-5-2 because they generally played 3-4-3. You think about how he grew into that game how he immediately came into the game, actually coming on as a substitute for Roda in that game. And he scores that goal at the top of the box, hitting first time, and really like just in terms of degree of difficulty, getting over the ball and being able to hit with power. He's obviously fortunate. But you think about the Goodwin chance midway through that second half, he pretty much gets Australia up the pitch by himself. Coming to feet, both with and without the ball, he's gotten Australia up the pitch. So I guess this game has provided overwhelming proof that Hrustic is best utilized deeper on the pitch. How that will be utilized going into Peru will be the trick. Will be interesting though.
There seemed to be a slight formation tweak in this one. You mentioned Hrustic playing a little bit deeper. Was it more? Did you read it as more of a 4-3-3 this time around?
I mean, that was evident against in the games against Vietnam and against China as well. That was just as evident.
I'm thinking back to the Japan game where I'm seeing Hrustic second striker.
Yeah,
totally isolated on an island by himself.
Yeah, that wasn't the case. That was more similar to what we were seeing in the Vietnam window, where you had Irvine pretty much as a penalty area threat, which is the only real logical usage for him. The interesting thing was the dynamics and how everyone worked around that. Just within in terms of how the team played. Who played where around them as a reference point, because I guess the funny thing is I was talking to this about someone during the game, and it's like, well, as I was watching it, and for a coach who really doesn't have a lot lacks imagination essentially, his curveball in a game like this was to play exactly the same way as Melbourne City. Because they played with inverted fullbacks. If they're not getting the ball into Hrustic / Berenguer, it's circulation outside, around the centre backs, or direct ball over the fullback, or a diag. We didn't really create much in that first half, and it was only until Hrustic started to really dictate how Australia played, they became relatively more threatening. But even then, it was still very, very volatile.
how did Australia get Hrustic more involved? Was it purely down to him and his positioning? Was it
I think
nothing
you
to
just
do with
wanted
the
the ball.
substitutions? Because was it a coincidence that Australia looked more threatening with McLaren on the pitch?
I don't think there is a really significant change between Lecky and McLaren as that point, at the top of the pitch, because there are only it was sporadic that they would actually show defeat. And, funnily enough, the 2 times that they actually show defeat, Australia generate their best chances of the second half.
Well, it's funny on that because, we can McLaren for his lack of hold-up play and not being able to incorporate teammates all the time on this show. But that bit of combination play involving McLaren that ended with his shot from the angle was probably the slickest bit of passing Australia put together in the entire match.
You do have to remember the context of Hrustic rotating out. So there's a lot of space for him to come into like that.
I'm not saying he did it himself, but he
no,
played his part.
But yeah, that's the thing. Like, you still have to. This is why I place such importance on desire to show for the ball and actually transmitting that towards your teammates and them having trust in you to actually play that ball in. Yes, he's a bit fortunate because he does have a lot of space to go into where he's able to compensate for what's a pretty heavy touch under pressure, so he can play out. But it's no real surprise, from that respect. Like, if you have a striker that wants the ball to feet and you're playing in the opposition's half, that's going to allow other players to play, irrespective of how well or poorly your midfield plays. So that was one interesting detail of all of that.
Joey, thoughts on Australia's midfield?
Well, it really was, I guess, has been hinted at, a tale of two halves. I mean, at time, I posted on Twitter during the thing, at times in that first half, it looked like a black hole had opened up just in between, the defense and the attack, basically like a 5-0-5 that the Socceroos were just sort of playing at times. It really was, remarkable. Like, I mean, Ante, you talk about the UAE not really coming out and trying to press Australia and playing not to lose themselves. It was, the movable object versus the resistible force, so to speak, with the two teams. Neither of them, and I was actually, to be honest, I was somewhat surprised that the UAE didn't begin to come out and press the game more at times when you saw, especially getting down that left flank, the troubles that they were creating down there with, I forget his name, the speed of the youngster, the 19-year-old. It was his 8th cap. I can remember everything but his name.
Harib, was it?
Yeah. Like, that was a matchup that they could have exploited, I think, a lot more than they actually did, or at least tried to work that a lot more than they did, because I didn't think Nate Atkinson looked as comfortable in that first half than what we've really seen. He got skinned a few times. And I also picking up on how the Socceroos got better. I think Hrustic getting more involved and acting as a facilitator helped Martin Boyle come into the contest a bit more. I think his ability and his willingness to run at defences, it created one of the only noticeable chances that the Socceroos sort of had. It wasn't even really a chance, really, but he rounded a few players and then drove into the box before being tackled. I think it was in the 9th or something minute in the first half. And then it was his drive into the box and his run that
I was waiting for it.
I was waiting for it too.
And then it was his drive. It was his drive into the penalty area and the play across the face of goal that set up Jackson Irvine. So I think he, as you said, Ante, Hrustic is growing into the game and being able to increasingly act as a reference point for the rest of the Socceroos attack. Really, was he was the conductor of their attack going forward. But that did help Boyle come into the game as well and really exert some control as the game went on. And I think in the end, especially considering how little the UAE deserved to win the game, it was a deserved win for the Socceroos.
I was really struck by just how conservative the fullbacks played throughout the game, but especially in the first half, just how deep Atkinson was sitting compared to his, usual approach. He seemed like he was wearing a straitjacket.
No, but you think about it, how they played is specifically to counteract for Mooy playing as a 1-6. And so, but
because he can't cover to save his life.
No, but even then, though, this is like the logical fallacy behind it. Like, if the defense is still in front of the ball, it doesn't matter where you position certain players. The opposition, once they win the ball, is still going to be able to quickly spring into attack. And so there were periods where, they're basically allowing the ball to go to Goodwin and Boyle on the other side because they're hedging between Hrustic. They were marking the Hrustic rather tightly. And so that's probably a contributing factor to him dropping deeper and, trying to operate between the lines from deeper starting positions. But, Irvine's pumping channel runs because, Goodwin's receiving the ball out wide and deep, like he's coming from high and wide starting position. Like, you're not really shifting the defense. So it doesn't really matter where Behic and Atkinson stay in that regard. Like, I don't necessarily understand the logic behind it, to be honest. Are they providing an extra number in midfield to play to? That's fine. But how many times was Atkinson driving into space? Wasn't happening a lot. Or at least, just he doesn't have to drive completely into space, but enough to create, a defensive attention. And that wasn't necessarily happening in the first or the second half either. A lot of what Australia created against the set defense was primarily through Hrustic. Everything else was in, dead ball and half counter scenarios. So I'm not. The weird thing about this game is that it is a relative positive in relation to a low bar, but you still have this like really overwhelming context to view it within. So I don't know.
Atkinson's come in for a lot of criticism, including from the TV panel for his defensive work and getting torched down that flank. Do you think that's just do you think that's an individual failing of his?
It's a byproduct of how we're losing the ball. Like, one, if a defender's not a defender, if a defender's always going to be lacking for pace, but they're being asked to play a certain way in possession, well, then I don't like hammering the individual defender is missing the point, frankly. Not the first time the broadcast has done that, but yeah, like a lot of what happened in those half counter scenarios, and this is coming back to why the UAE didn't really let's say be more aggressive. It's because they were happy with parity, and they felt that would have been enough. And there was enough to suggest that it would have been enough. But I guess that changes once Hrustic started to really grow into the game.
I want to return to Mooy. Jack coming through the comment, Mooy dropping a 90 after no ball for 6 months. As a wise man once said, this is football heritage. I mean, no real game time since January. We had 60 minutes in the friendly against Jordan. Graham Arnold said in the post-match interview that the entire reason we played the friendly against Jordan was to get minutes in the legs of Aaron Mooy.
As we will say.
Like, why is he considered so vital to this Socceroos team? And do we have a credible alternative as a number 6 in the squad? Because I think this is the problem, is none of the other replacements that are in the squad at the moment are out-and-out sixes in that way that can compensate for Irvine being given that license.
It's a tricky one because given how they've played, and if you want an Irvine or a McGree to play as that penalty area threat as a third midfielder, and you want Hrustic to play as a third, as one of those three midfielders as well, you kind of need someone to be able to distribute in that respect. And Mooy is probably the best, or the most suitable player in that regard. But it still creates a lot of consequential effects because without the ball is rather poor, and it becomes like, as was evidenced in the second half, the team's still ultimately relying on Hrustic. It's just in different positions in comparison to, let's say, the Japan or the Saudi Arabia game where he's dropping from high positions.
Joey, I'm giving you the opportunity, a wide open opportunity here to drop your genre propaganda.
Well, I'm not going to necessarily just push genre for this, but like Mooy's obviously his strength is distribution, but like thinking back to the game, I didn't see Mooy do anything distribution-wise or otherwise that made me think he's the only man in the Socceroos squad that can make that pass, that can do that move.
There was some. But look, I wouldn't entirely be against genre starting. But the question is where, if there was knowing, because really, like, you don't want to go into the realm of fantasy booking. The only real logical, even then, the only real practical change, given how Arnold wants this team to play, is McGree for Irvine. But then the difference becomes instead of Hrustic defending as the second striker in that 4-4-2, you switch and have Hrustic defending deeper with McGree as the second striker defending in the 4-4-2. Because that was how they defended. They went back to 4-4-2 block and didn't press. They sat, which was kind of contrary to the Aussie DNA of chasing and fighting and harassing. Every time we defended, we were sitting 4-4-2 mid block, and allowing them to play. So I guess that's really the only, foreseeable change. I don't know. Would you play genre as?
I mean, the big question is, can Mooy back up another 90 minutes in a few days turnaround? Less than
play against Jordan, and so that's 3 games in 9 days. That's a big one.
I mean, they'll give him the chance to, regardless of whether or not he can.
Yeah, of course.
He'll be given every chance to do it. Yeah. Like, I can, Mooy's a difficult one. Like, I mean, that the first half especially, like we're talking about, he's supposed to be the distributor, but there was no real distribution happening from the Socceroos. It was all just around the periphery, nothing really much happening. And I guess, if Australia really aren't going to be able to get into the game until Hrustic, starts to drop deep and get more involved, the questions will become that, well, if we're going to be reliant on Hrustic anyway to be the creative spark and to do all these things, are the limitations that Aaron Mooy has off the ball and all of that sort of stuff worth it compared to what he brings to the squad, especially considering that he's not, the guy, he's not the man for this team.
But the question is the question is it going to happen in this game?
Well, no, that's the thing. This is all the realms of hypothetical. None of us are Graham Arnold, and I think we've all pretty much established, we can all probably predict what Graham Arnold can do. This is purely a thought experiment. Is the trade-off there? And it's a difficult one. Aaron Mooy can ping a pass, but what else is Aaron Mooy bringing to the table at this point that justifies him starting in a footballing sense? What does he bring into the table that justifies him starting over other options in the team aside from gigantic amounts of NRI and Premier League experience?
Yeah, because I remember making this comparison years ago. He was I'd always viewed him as an Aldi brand Tony Cruz, and because you think about it, what did Tony Cruz provide outside of this awesome distribution? And
90% of football fans who hear that, 90% of football fans who hear that, Ante, will think that's a tremendous compliment. But it's just coming from Ante, it's actually a scathing criticism.
The interesting parallel, is you are that question of trade-off is becoming a more prevalent question with both of them. That's actually been an interesting parallel to witness as their careers have gone on and as they've gotten older. As their ground coverage and ability, their physical capacity declines, it's actually been rather interesting to see. I was pretty happy with that one, but it depends on how you want to play with the players around him. I'm not entirely against genre and playing as a 6 in this kind of game, but I just don't see it.
Well, there was a lot of talk about Aussie battler spirit, passion, mongrel courage, as Jack has pointed out in the comments. And you know who's demonstrated some Aussie battler spirit this afternoon? It's Nick Dabano battling through his technical difficulties to join us here on the stream. Nick, I'm going to get you to unmute yourself and everybody cross your fingers, knock on wood. Can we hear him?
Is this going to be a buenos dias ragazzi?
Buongiorno ragazzi.
Where completely blow everyone's headphones again. Like it'll be
Buenas
one or the other. Yeah. Good afternoon. I literally before we started, this was all working fine, and then something happened on my computer. It wasn't the microwave. It wasn't the TV. It was this bloody computer that decided to crap the proverbial. No, it wasn't the toaster. Unless there's a phantom living in my house, because there's no one else here.
We all know you podcast from a smart toaster, Nick.
One of those old LG fridges. But basically, we're all good now. I hope. It had to reset the computer about 3 or 4 times, but we got there in the end. And there was a lot of panicking, a lot of changing of cables, but we got there in the end.
So did the Socceroos, Nick. What did you make of the performance? We haven't heard from you so far.
Well, what have you guys not talked about yet? Because it's been 26 minutes. I feel like we're regurgitating. We don't want to influence you. We want to get your. No.
If you're repeating some of our opinions, that's pure coincidence.
Yeah, I think the main question is, what are your thoughts on your own performance this morning? You came off the bench. How do you think you went, mate? You pull up okay?
Look, I came to receive the ball deep, and that was something new. Did that once in the second half. Wow, I actually came to get the ball in a different area. No, I thought I did pretty well. I think I put my hand up to start on Wednesday or Tuesday, whatever it might be. And showed a lot of Aussie DNA and a lot of fighting spirit in the second half. So we got through. But anyways,
that might be the comment of the season, by the way. Blake Hampton, Aldi, and the Socceroos supply chain issues.
Yeah. Just in regards to the game, look, the first half, I know at least 3 of us were up live because Ante, I know you got your good sleep, and I am so jealous that you got your 10 hours. That was a tough watch in the first 45 minutes. Oh my God, it was a struggle. Then even the first 10, 15 minutes, but to be honest, the whole first half, I was thinking, oh my God, the more they keep attacking down that left-hand side, they're eventually going to pull a winner. I honestly was getting quite worried in those early stages, especially Atkinson sort of being on an island and Bailey Wright not necessarily complimenting him with his lack of pace when Atkinson would be exposed on the right-hand side. So that was a bit of a worry. But even after Irvine scored, the second they equalised straight away, it was just, you got to be kidding me, right? Bloody trust. The fence folded like a cheap suit. It was fun while it lasted, but that 10, 15 minutes where Ajdin Hrustic took over, I enjoyed that. He's such a fantastic player. It's just a shame that everything else around him, in that midfield composition, was so poor. And I know that there were people saying we deserved to win that game. Yeah, we might have deserved something because UAE were not great at all. But we were not good. We were terrible. I'm just putting it bluntly honest. We were not good. And we were just lucky the UAE were not that much better. They had chances to chase the game, as, Stephen said here. But that was the way they chased the game. They never looked like scoring in those last 10 minutes. They never actually put us under any pressure. God forbid when a team actually puts us under pressure, how, we're going to look if on that one attack we just folded defensively. So going into that next game, there needs to be some changes, I think, especially in the defensive back four. I think, Kai Rolls got exposed. I think, Bailey Wright was exposed with Atkinson next to him. I think there needs to be some changes there and some changes further up the pitch. And that midfield, oh my goodness. Aaron Mooy, just so laborious, man. It's just the same thing over and over again. There were some people that was saying he played well, and I'm thinking, what game are you watching? Are we watching the same thing? Or are we looking at completed passes? He got 95% completed passes. For an AFL reference, is he the Tom Mitchell of the Socceroos? Just because he gets a lot of the ball, does that suddenly make him a good player.
Do not go here talking about the Disco Hawks.
Hey, we bet you on the weekend, so I can. But no. In all seriousness, though, like the lack of minutes for Aaron Mooy, the way he's utilized in this system, and everything else, it's just not a good fit. And they need to change that against Peru. So, look, they won. Thank God. Yes, we'll take the win any day, but there are so many issues that need to be addressed.
Yeah.
So many going into that Peru game. We can't just go, yeah, we won. Great. Fantastic. We got through. Because just completely, papering over all those cracks. And that's felt like something we've done for so long. Think about the winning streak, the hashtag streak, and smashing minnows and beating minnows, that Vietnam 1-0 and everything else. It was all, oh, yeah, we're still winning. We're still getting results. But then when the pressure got turned up, we folded. And I'm worried the same thing's going to happen against Peru. Even if they have a number of key individuals out of that game and they're not necessarily playing that well at the moment, I still have my concerns.
Well, it reminds me of a passage I read in the book Soccernomics, which is very good, by the way, which is that blonde players get scouted more because scouts notice them as opposed to players with brown hair. I think
is that why Jason Davidson got called up? Because he had the pink hair?
That must be why there's not a lot of wogs in the Socceroos team anymore.
But no, I was going to say that's why everybody seems to think Mooy plays well when he doesn't, because he stands out. Exactly. And
Lex Luthor running around the midfield.
You put your head in the China wall.
No, you always notice him.
Can I just add one thing? I know I was joking a little bit about sort of doing my best Jamie McLaren impersonation, but actually seeing him come and get the ball in that one play, I've got to say, I was pleasantly surprised that he actually got involved in the interplay. I want to see more of that from him. I don't know how much more we're going to see that from him if he even plays against Peru. But seeing that was all right. That was a nice little bit of play there, nice little bit of interplay. So it was good to see, I guess, him come off the line for a change, off the final man, actually get involved in the build-up for a change, because, it would be nice to see more of that more regularly, considering he's supposed to be a Jason Cummings type. Maybe he was trying to play a little bit more like Jason Cummings in that instance. So, I'm just quoting exactly what Arnie said about them being the same sort of player. So maybe he took, a bit of inspiration from that.
I mean, Arnie talked about having the set of strikers who all had different attributes, and then he started none of them when Adam Taggart went down injured. He has his 4 strikers; they're all different. That's why Jason Cummings was left out of the squad. Were you guys the same as me? Thinking after UAE scored that, gee, it would have been nice to have the CumDog on the bench to bring on at this moment.
I was thinking it would have been nice to have the CumDog when I heard the news about Taggart going down the night before. I was thinking it would be nice to have the CumDog in the squad when I saw the squad get released.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Ante.
I think the Sainsbury.
No, the Sainsbury one was the bigger one.
Oh, we'll get to the defence, Ante. We'll get there.
Considering we've got, as many left backs as centre backs now, disregarding Stensness as a makeshift CB.
He's been watching England, mate.
I mean,
all the wing backs.
I mean, it's really weird. And something about that, how the defensive 4 set up. They were very, let's say, disjointed, and they were. I guess Behic and Rolls aside was very would sag a lot, but against that, and that's specifically on Kaio's side. Whereas Harib is the faster attacker, you would kind of want to leave yourself with more space to cover, and so there were a lot of phases where we're defending in mid block, and Atkinson's side is higher up the pitch. It was strange to see, but I mean,
do you think that was by design, or do you think that's just Atkinson in his head, just attack? I want to get forward.
No, I want to get forward because you go by. I reckon you'd be able to go by average position. And I reckon Behic and Rolls would be deeper than both Wright and Atkinson. I don't think it's just Atkinson there.
I think the
that's
fullbacks
overtime.
are taking their cue from the centre back they're playing next to. And I don't think Rolls was a particularly confident member of that back four. He looked like he'd turned up to his first day of a job he wasn't qualified for, and he didn't actually know what he was
Hey,
doing.
it's my first day, guys.
Yeah, exactly. It was it was his second day, but still, like I felt very nervous whenever he was involved near the play on the ball. There was one hoofed clearance that I sort of went, oh no, like I felt bad for him at times. He looked shaky to me. And I'm not just running Dan Hall propaganda here.
Well, I mean, it's not even Dan Hall probably. It's interesting, Miloš Degenek sitting on the bench was interesting.
That's strange.
He
That is
hasn't
strange.
played. He
Because
hasn't played
Sainsbury
at all.
dropping out.
I mean, he hasn't played, but neither has
But
Aaron Mooy.
what has happened to Miloš
Yeah, but Aaron
Degenek's
Mooy has
national
greater
team
NRI
stocks?
than. Sorry, Josh, go.
But what has happened to Miloš Degenek's national team stocks? It's been very odd to see because I mean Bailey Wright has been called in from the cold all of a sudden.
It is
Jamie?
interesting.
That NRI.
Sorry, Nick.
Is it because he's playing in the MLS?
Yeah, I reckon.
Marv, the MLS.
Yeah. Playing for the it's the Columbus Crew, yeah.
It's the Columbus
Yeah.
Crew.
But Ante, you mentioned he hasn't been playing, right?
Oh, not a lot. And when he has played, he's had pretty shaky performances. But ultimately, I mean, outside of Sainsbury,
he's our blue chip. He's our blue chip defender, and we don't have anyone like him.
Well, in this squad, we don't have anyone like him. Are they players you would prefer to see? More of a throw forward. This becomes more of a throw forward, like in the event we qualify, or in the event we, let's say, looking forward to the next World Cup cycle. This is a problem area because without Sainsbury and Taggart, it was like, okay, so we can't play through, and we can't play. We can't get out either without him. So without Sainsbury specifically, I mean. And so that's why there were, to see Hrustic. So I'm sorry I keep coming back to it, but like a lot of it was, conditioned by Hrustic. Just, he was like, I've had enough of this shit. Just give me the ball and I'll sort it out. Because that's, there were a lot of moments in that first half where he was frustrated.
Well, I mean, you talk about what are we going to do if we make the World Cup, Ante? I mean, the answer is it's likely that Harry Souttar will likely be incorporated back into the squad. I mean, reading articles coming out of Stoke, he's going to be joining the Potters pre-season training next month. So one figures that if he's back fitness, once again, we're trying to predict Graham Arnold here, one would envision that Graham Arnold tries to bring him back into the squad next to Trent Sainsbury.
He could make Popovich a millionaire.
Just genuine.
Yes, he could. He could make Dan Hall a millionaire. You know who he should make a millionaire? Harrison Delbridge. That's propaganda.
Genuine question though, like if because obviously Trent Sainsbury is without a club now as well. Does that change anything in terms of his national team stocks? If say he makes a move back here, or if he, does it like if that will that change things? Considering now Bailey Wright, you speak about NRI, Ante. I mean, Bailey Wright's playing for Sunderland. They just got promoted to the championship. Like, is that going to change things? That if we're going to rank things on NRI? Look, I think that's a good point, Joey. That Souttar will be the starting centre back, and I think he's locked in. To play in the World Cup if he's ready and fit and good to go. Obviously, he'll get maybe 3 months of football with Stoke before the season starts. If he's ready to go. It depends
when his recovery is. He did his ACL in November, so ostensibly he could be back September, October, kicking the ball around. But ACLs are weird. He could, try to come back then and suffer a setback and not be available till 2023. It's the same reason that Ellie Carpenter ACL's injury has so much intrigue hanging over it, because while these days, in the days of, stem cells in Germany and what have you, recovery times are a lot quicker than normal, there is still a level of the unknown in recovery times, I think. But yeah, I think I agree with you, Nick. If he comes back, Souttar is going to start for the Socceroos.
A lot of questions coming in about Aussie DNA. We'll get to that, but
let's not get to that. Remember the Ollie Roos in Cambodia?
Oh dear. No comment. I want to come back to this. How good were the UAE really?
They stunk, man.
They are terrible.
They stunk.
Oh,
Like
bad.
it was like we were just less bad, quite frankly, over the course of the 90 minutes. We were less bad. And so I guess that's the kind of context that you have to, one, view this game in, and two, view the next game in, because there's still a lot of room for improvement here, because
they've had
five coaches dominated the game
in 3 years or something, including Ben Marvike twice.
Yeah.
So, it's not as if Emirati football is in some golden era. I was disappointed that Omar Abdul Rahman was only a
3 minutes
defeat cigar.
Yeah.
The last throw of the dice. Because he's always fun, but I don't know how effective he would have been, given he's just been called in from the international wilderness. But they didn't have much about them. I thought they were very nervy in the second half when the pressure was on. I thought they were very standoffish in the first half and didn't really apply pressure in moments where they could have made more of, the Socceroos playing themselves into trouble. I felt they were hesitant and they weren't punishing Australia's mistakes in a ruthless fashion like I believe Peru will.
They were very passive.
We give, Arnie a bit of crap, for playing not to lose games and setting his team up in a timid fashion. That's exactly how the United Arab Emirates and Rodolfo Arobena set up the UAE. So we got to give him crap too. Coming into this game, we've been talking about it for months. There were areas that you can exploit this Socceroos side in, and it felt like I don't know if it was paralysis by analysis or just refusal to actually try something new and be made to look the fool, but they just didn't do anything. And when it came down to it, they were just poor. They were really poor. They were bad. They were poorly set up, timid in approach, and they can have no complaints.
I don't necessarily think setup was bad, but the approach was the big one. It's more big because that creates situational circumstances, because there are a lot of positions in which Ali Salmin was able to get into really good positions and play through, but a lot of their possession was really just circulation around the defensive line and Ali Salmin, and just sporadic entrances into Australia's half, and that's not a consequence of Australia really restricting them in that respect or denying certain passes into the opposition half. They did get into good positions, but it was more like I said earlier in the piece, a lot of their possession was predicated on just taking the sting out of the game and slowing down the tempo. It was really strange to see, especially over the first 30 minutes, because Australia weren't really generating anything. But UAE didn't really want to generate anything with their position outside of counter-attacking scenarios, like outside of their immediate, let's say regains of possession. It was such a strange game. And I guess on the whole, given how the game developed over the course of the 90 minutes, you can say Australia deserved it. But like I said, it's a very contextual discussion to have here, because it was just such a low bar.
Nick, I think this question goes to you. How much Aussie DNA will Australia need to get past Peru? And which Aussie legend, footballing or otherwise, will Arnie and his charges need to channel the spirit of in order to do so?
Well, they're playing a South American team. I know it was a Batuta Advocate article. I know that he just won an A-League Men's Championship as a coach, so it kind of writes itself, doesn't it? That channel the spirit of John Aloisi's penalty if it goes to penalty shootout. I
hope no one in the squad has waxed their chest hair.
No.
That's a betrayal of the legacy.
That wouldn't be taking it to the next level, man.
Look, the whole DNA stuff. I still can't believe that people are still going to the well with this. Have to show Aussie spirit. As Robert Cornthwaite tweeted before about it, how can you, when you're the favorite going into a game, this works when you're an underdog. It works in a way you show fighting spirit going up against a team you're not supposed to beat. But when you're the team that's supposed to win and you're banking on fighting spirit DNA, where the underdogs, doesn't really work, right? It's not really a fit. But even then, like we've been going to the well with the same mentality and the same slogan of, it seems like it's ingrained in Australian sporting culture, though. This isn't just a Socceroos thing. This is something that plagues our Olympic teams. You think about all the time. Basketball, same thing. Oh, the Aussie spirit, go up against the US. Got to show that spirit against them. Same thing with any of the other sports, like probably hockey, whatever else, whatever it might be. It's always Aussie spirit, Aussie spirit, Aussie spirit. I don't know. When are we going to turn around and stop using that as a cop-out and actually focus on the X's and O's? Like, and actually focus on that, there's more to it than just intrinsic, fighting spirit, DNA, never say die. That's part of it. Of course, you want to have the mentality to fight for games if you're behind and you're going for games and the odds are stacked against you. But when you're the favorite and you've actually got to make, decisions in a game, going into the game, in-game adjustments, whatever it might be, going up against a certain team, you can't just rely on expecting to win and, everything else that comes with it in terms of showing fighting spirit. You've actually got to show those. You've got to actually, get the job done when you're looking at the X's and O's.
Because that takes looking past the surface level, though. When you're talking about going back to the well and, how that's used in the public sphere and in public commentary, if it is a crutch. But in sport, like, I know will is a skill in certain respects, but like effort should be a basic expectation. This shouldn't be
level.
Like this shouldn't be something that's just overwhelmingly definitive. The reality is, like, I remember writing about this after I think it was when was it? It was after the Matildas exit in the Asian Cup. And then there was a lot of
justifying their performance against Peru.
Both Arnold and Gustafsson, talking about how they're proud of their players because they put in effort. But like, effort reflects character, and character is everything in football. Character is everything in football, but there are other things that define character in football. And let's look past that surface level of being determined and giving it a red hot go. Because even the idea of giving it a red hot go, like if it's not or bravery is not defined by how willing you are to take the ball in a duel or in a contest. Like bravery can be, there are a lot of prisms in which bravery can be viewed within. So
effort in any other field is such a double-edged compliment. Like, can you imagine if somebody gave you a story they wrote and your response was, "Oh, you put in so much effort to that, didn't you?" You tell them to go and F themselves. Like, it's praising effort in absence of anything else. It's a backhanded compliment. Like, I can't praise you for the skill you went about it, the idea that underpins it, the bravery that you showed, as you said. I'm just going to praise your effort. I'm just going to praise, your ability to try. Yeah, it's like, good effort, lad. You were there. You gave it a go. Like, no, it's not professional foot. It's
no. Wouldn't give out a gold star, Joey, because you don't get awards for participation. Not back in Graham Arnold's day. When men were real men.
I don't know whether
that really annoyed me.
Do we really want to do that media watch
Sunday? Yeah.
No. It's not about media watch. I'm talking about the post-match press conference that Graham Arnold did. I'm talking about when he said that that battling spirit of the underdog was an old Aussie trait. And that generations.
Man, Australia's only
born
in 1901. Australia's not an old country. It's like it's one of the youngest countries on planet Earth.
I don't know what he meant by old Aussie trait. Did he mean the 80s, I suppose?
When he played back in my day.
Back in Frank Arrock's Mad Dogs era, where we didn't qualify for any World Cups.
This is such an AFLism when you hear that.
But what he said was,
look, I just got to put their head over the
He said that it was an old Aussie trait, and that generations change, and that's what he was trying to drum into the players. And the fact that he had FaceTime with them in this camp meant he implied that they had more fighting spirit this time because he had the FaceTime with them to drum home the message about Aussie courage. And I'm just tearing my hair out. What are you talking about?
Like,
that doesn't mean anything.
Like, by extrapolating from that, does Graham Arnold think the UAE are cowards because they lost? Like, does the teams lose games because they're
Or
scared?
or is he just calling his players soft and that he has to hold their hand through these kinds of games?
Like, yeah, I think we should probably get into this Sunday. It is like this back in my day stuff infuriates
bullshit.
me. And like we were talking about this in the chat yesterday, just how it infuriates me in these appeals for the good old days. Well, who says, is it The Wire? You know, the thing about the old days, they're the old days. Like, I'll just say this one thing. The old days are gone and they are not coming back. And rather than pine for the old days, figure out how the new days work and figure out how you can make the new days work for you. That is all I'm going to say for now. Wait till Sunday, because otherwise we're going to be here for 3 hours.
To quote John Favreau's clown in the episode of Seinfeld, you're living in the past, man. Like, literally, it's the same. It's like, why do we always have to harken back to nostalgia all the time? If it's not, going back to the 90s of that generation, it's always harkening back to, the golden generation, this, that. Oh, we did it differently back then. Like it was even when you think about, again, I hate bringing this up, but it is quite apt in this situation. But you think about it when there was all the discussion around, should we cap Christian Volpato? It was like, we capped Harry Kewell when he was 17. Doesn't mean it's the same situation. Like, just because we did it then doesn't mean it works now. The shoes don't always fit on the same foot. Like, things are not always the same. You can't directly correlate that. Like, it was the same when they were talking about Chris Economidis in that same vein. Different times, context. So, as you said, Joey, we've got to focus on the now, because you keep looking back in the past, you're going to lose precedent of what's happening today, and then that will help set the future. We're always looking back. Oh, go back to the 80s, Biff, rah. Like, fighting spirit. That is like 30 years ago now. Like, that shit's in the past. Like,
did you see
forget about
Draymond Green's post-game presser in the NBA Finals? Like, just go and watch that if you haven't seen that, and hear what Draymond Green said.
Like, at the same time, though, if you don't know your history, you're not going to know your future.
Yeah, but there's a difference between knowing your history.
No. But see, this is the point that I'm going to make. There is such a revisionist idea of what has come before us in Australian football. There are so many rose-tinted glasses with respect to how things were back in the day. It's just such a cop-out to compare things how they are now to how they were back in the day, because, like you said, you'll never get them back. Stop trying to, halt the progress of time. Like, that's impossible. You can't do that. So you have to figure out, like, how to make things work now. And that
goes for everything. It's not just
of course. But so, in what do humans hate more than change? Nothing. Like, the reality is that looking in the past is a crutch, and it allows them to not look anywhere past the surface level. Because in Australian football right now, we are in the predicament we are in because of that. Like, we can't look past next week. We can't look past, we essentially don't look at the big picture. And these continual, parallels back to the golden generation is just such bullshit. Pardon my language, but it's just a joke. We just have to stop this shit.
I mean, yeah, it's not helpful. Like, the golden generation, fantastic team. Great players involved in the golden generation. It's golden generation.
They were just as reliant on one or two creative players like we are now. What's the
for the benefit of the podcast, Paul's come through saying, to be honest, minus Hrustic and Ryan, not one player could lace the boots of many Socceroos past teams.
But like, the problem is,
well,
all right,
my
problem is
saying we're not comparing it in terms of talent necessarily. We're comparing it in terms of this idea of mental resilience and toughness. But there's not some unique golden generation trait.
But even the comparison is besides the point. Even if it was the case that even if Hrustic and Ryan couldn't lace up the boots of the Socceroos, if there was nobody, which I'm not saying there is or there isn't, it doesn't matter. They're not going out to play the golden generation against Peru. They're going out and, playing a bunch of South Americans wearing a white kit with a red sash. Not Harry Kuehl, John Aloisi. They're not in competition with the golden generation. They're not in competition with the side that made the 1974 World Cup.
But the reality is, as cynical as this might sound, the get off my lawn commentary says that they are.
But
Coming from those precursors, like the reality is, and this happens in a lot of sports, like people love their own legacies more than they love the game. And that's why when they look at new generations, they always look at it with disdain. Like you look at, let's say, a player like, all right, you think about it. Stephen Curry, when he was getting unanimous MVP, he was the best player in the league. He was just completely transforming how basketball can be interpreted, yeah? A guy like Oscar Robertson didn't like it because it was completely different to how he played when he was playing, in the NBA at that point. He would, it's just older generations in sport always do their utmost to shit on new generations. That's just how it is because they want to protect their legacies.
I mean, you can go back and you can find the quote from Socrates, the great one, not the Brazilian one, from antiquity, talking about the young generation loving luxury, having bad manners, they're tyrants, all of this sort of stuff, thousands of years ago. Like,
you don't need to read The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Bleep to... Nick, what are your thoughts? Can you give us a book review, mate?
I'm no comment.
That's and that's the thing. Like, they're not in competition with Golden Gen. Golden Gen aren't in competition with them. Like, we should enjoy the Golden Gen for what they did. And, like you said, Ante, know your history. There are lessons that you can take from the Golden Gen, like you can take from any generation, but it's not just a copy and paste job. And even, it can't be a copy and paste job. If you attempted to copy and paste what produced the Golden Generation these days, there's been reports on this. It would fail horribly because society has changed. And screw it, I'm going into my Sunday content now, but it has changed for the better. Like, yes, maybe there's not so much jeopardy for players as there was back in the Golden Generation, but by and large, that's a good thing. So, like, these days, a player washing out of an academy can fall back on a high school and university education. Why is that bad? Like, that's a good thing. Just like players have education and vocational training, and there's a lot more opportunities available, and there's better working standards, and there's better living standards for players on the way up. That's a good thing. Like, I don't think we shouldn't decry rises in living standards and working conditions. As I put in the chat, we shouldn't fetishize poverty or poor working conditions just on the off chance it produces a few better football players.
Hey, you never know, Joey. We went to 50 basis points yesterday, mate.
All right, before we get into a big short watch from Ante, but like, footballers are people, and there are far more that won't make it than there are that will. And I think it's a good thing that there's a safety net and they're looked after, and it's incumbent upon present coaches, modern coaches, and future coaches to find new ways to produce great players within that system, rather than wishing for a system that, might make their jobs easier, but it would produce worse outcomes. I'm not accusing any coaches or players of saying this. This is a commentary on just a sort of
I think
vibe.
it is a natural, I guess, inclination to try and go back to what you were doing before, because what you seem to be regressing. You seem to be going backwards. So what were we doing before? So that's like a natural human reaction to try and recreate. And, if we had the talent level of the Golden Gen, or the players playing in those leagues now, shall we say, then the national team would probably be in a slightly better spot. I don't think that's totally controversial.
I don't think
Ante's
that is
already objecting,
controversial.
but
No, it's not controversial. Like, it's fine, but like, it's just the people. I guess the people who are now criticizing, such a predicament were the same people who, who facilitated the means for this.
Like,
Like-
they also help make it. They're coaches now. They're administrators now.
Like the same people who are now most vocal in criticizing Australian football's current predicament are arguably the most complicit in creating that environment. Like, fuck. Like, you know what? That's ultimately up to the people to see through that bullshit, quite frankly.
Ante giving me plenty to bleep in the edit. Nick wanted to jump in. You've been waiting patiently.
No. Just quickly. I mean, Joey, you make a really good point because there's one thing as well. We've got to humanize these people too, right? Like, there is life after football. And if people have that backup and secondary option and they want to get an education, they want that, then let them. Like, things aren't the way they used to be. We're not, if we can't send the player overseas straight away at 17, well, I mean, or we can't, have that same pathway and everything like it used to be in the 90s and the 80s. Well, it's different. I think, as well, because we know that careers can be cut very short. It's good to have these backup options. And there's one thing as well is, all right, I want to kind of leave it at this point, is the past is the past. Golden generation did their thing. Let's celebrate it for what it was.
It was fantastic.
It was unbelievable on many levels in terms of getting Australia back into the World Cup. There were a lot of talented individual players, but let's leave it there. Let's focus on the now. Let's focus with what we've got and stop trying to, go, oh, we need exactly the same as what we had back then. Let's just work with what we've got and work with what we can actually do to improve that situation. Because Josh, you mentioned not every situation in terms of going back and trying to do the same thing again because it worked back then is going to work now. Because as we know, the world can change very quickly. And it has over the last couple of years. Things have changed. People's priorities have changed. Things change quickly. They change on a dime. And if you keep trying to, do the same thing over and over again, well, it's that famous saying. It's insanity. Hoping for the same result. You can't always get the same result. That's why you have reviews. You change things on a dime when it's not working. So that's kind of the main thing that I wanted to, I guess, say on that one. But yeah, look, it is frustrating that we keep having to have this conversation because we shouldn't be talking about passion and desire and that as being the thing and talking about harkening back to the good old days. The good old days are the good old days. That's that. Like now it's 2022. It's a different world. Let's work in this world, in this environment.
I think we better bring this back to the game that's actually coming up on Tuesday morning because we got slightly sidetracked by the big picture there. Shout out to Geraldo.
Us? No.
He says, shout out to Peru, despite improving, no longer having the class and individual achievement of Solano, Pizarro, Pete Guerrero, Farfan, Vargas. I mean, Ante, international football isn't just about individual players and individual talent. It can be about that, but it's about getting players who don't spend much time together to function as a collective. We've seen many star-studded international teams falter because they didn't work well together.
Let me take
Unmute
myself
yourself
off mute first. I mean, I guess the thing about international football, the context is that this is why things like NRI exist, because you can't. International football is an ecosystem completely involved within itself. It's completely exclusive to ultimate club things. However much things like club form and rhythm can come into play, you're not going to find balance and some kind of function just by whacking players in and saying, yeah, go for it, do what you want. I think this World Cup qualification phase for Australia has been enough evidence of that, especially when you put players who aren't really suited to certain roles, but because of hierarchy and status, you put them there expecting them to do a job. It doesn't work that way. And that's probably however much South American football is flawed. That's probably the contrast between Gareca and Arnold. Because he has, I guess, cultivated a squad that extracts the maximum out of each of those players. They are the sum of their parts, as opposed to, what we've seen with the Socceroos, essentially. And so, from a narrative basis, it's pretty cool that we do have these teams playing off for a spot in Qatar. Ultimately, I hope Peru lose. Like, I want the Socceroos to bloody go through, but it's just lamentable to see, another coach, elsewhere doing more with less, as opposed to, Graham Arnold arguably doing less with more, considering the squad we did have 5 years ago or 6 years ago.
Paul says, does Nick have any mail if Alex Robertson will be debuting for the Socceroos or Peru next week? Very good. I want to get into the game, and there's two routes we can go down here. There's fantasy booking, as Mike of ESPN wants us to do. If Arnie went AWOL and the TNC crew were hastily installed as the Socceroos head coaches, what is the starting 11 on Tuesday?
No, if I was installed as Socceroos coach, I would quit.
Hey, no, you got to get fired. You got to get that payout, baby. Tom McCall asks, practically, if you could influence Arnold's decisions for Peru, what would you focus on? 2 to 3 realistic specifics. So, sort of up to you guys which route we want to go down here. It's a choose your own adventure. Do we want to throw our fantasy booking at the wall, or do we want to suggest a couple of tweaks that could improve the team?
I love fantasy booking. I love fantasy booking, but I just know it's not real. It's not going to be any help for next week. But maybe let's do a bit of both. Let's do a bit of both.
Do both. Let's go around the room and do both.
I'll go for the practical.
All right. We'll do the realistic team, and then we'll finish off with a bit of fantasy football. How does that sound? All
right. The only real change, I've always liked Lecky up front. Wouldn't start McGree, or not. I would start McGree actually instead of Irvine, and then have Hrustic as the deeper player in defensive phases with McGree up. If Arnold is going to defend that way, which is more than likely. But then again, who's to say that he even goes 4-3-3 because this is a quote unquote, more dangerous team? Would he, essentially crap his pants because they're a more dangerous team like he did against, Japan and Saudi Arabia? Even then, like that creates like this massive conundrum. But in the event, assuming that we will play 4-3-3, 4-4-2 defensive block, I'd consider McGree for Irvine, because it's Irvine represents a huge trade-off, and you can't. Him and Mooy just, they don't work. They flat out don't work, and that's the one real change I'd consider. The other one, I'm okay with Lecky starting, but I would throw Juke on for crossing, inshallah, man.
Really? That is not what I expected you to say.
Like, in the scenario that it will get to that, essentially.
So you're saying as a substitute?
Yeah, as a potential substitute. Like, why not
is
throw Juke on?
Is Goodwin still your starting left winger?
I'd have Tilio. That's the other one. That was the third one that I was like, Tilio for Goodwin.
We said realistic suggestions, aren't they?
But no, like, look, that should be a realistic suggestion. Why, like that? Why isn't someone like Tilio considered, a practical choice?
I mean, he's in the squad. It is a realistic selection.
Yeah, like, why isn't it? Why is he essentially,
human victory cigar,
the Casper Tafter essentially of the 2006 squad, extended squad? Like, why is this? Why is he not realistically in consideration to even play minutes, let alone start? Like, that's insane. I'd have him ahead of Goodwin.
I was listening to a rival podcast that will go unnamed about this game, and it was suggested that that Tilio cannot start for the Socceroos because he's not starting for his club, which I think is backwards thinking. Like if
So was that?
if you're yeah.
Go for it. I was going to ask if Mario from Doncaster called into that show too, but like...
no. It was Scott McDonald who said it on the Gagan pod, and I can understand the line of thinking, but I think that's very rigid. And if you're calling him up to the Socceroos, despite the fact that he doesn't start for Melbourne City on a regular basis, when all are fit and available, then I think naturally you're saying that you disagree with Patrick Kisnorbo's assessment of Tilio, and therefore he should be a realistic starter. Joey?
I mean, if we're not starting Marco Tilio because he doesn't start for Melbourne City, somebody like Aaron Mooy hasn't played football since January for his club in Shanghai. I mean, Hrustic hasn't been a regular starter for Frankfurt the entire time. I mean, we're going to bench him next? And Tilio was, I feel like I promise I'm not just stealing Ante's ideas. Tilio starting for Goodwin was one of the ideas I'd have as well. A lot of my thinking, it's highly dependent about, if we're looking at realistic changes, it's based on, some of it's dependent upon knowledge we just can't have surrounding fitness, wise and aerobic capacity. And obviously like Sainsbury, can he start? If he's fit enough to start, you bring in Sainsbury. Fran Karacic, we know the fitness issues that he's had across the past 12 months because of COVID and the like. Is he in the squad, but he's not capable of running out 90 minutes, and that's why Atkinson is starting. But realistically, I mean, we talked about it before the game against the UAE. Atkinson and Karacic, it's sort of like 1A and 1B. They're both pretty good options. So that's potentially a realistic change you can make. I mean, the same thing with Taggart. Apparently the latest line out of the Socceroos camp is, well, initially in his post-game presser, Arnold said he'd be heading back to Japan, only to be subsequently be told by the physios, actually, no, that's not right. There's a chance that he can get up for the game against Peru. What sort of role can Adam Taggart play? Because I think, it's been well established on this show that we're big fans of what Adam Taggart can bring to the squad. What sort of role can he potentially play? So a lot of it's dependent on that. I agree with Ante and Riley McGree for Jackson Irvine. Similar players. You could bring them in. Could bring in Dennis Jonro for Aaron Mooy as a 6, which we've exhaustively discussed on this show already. So those are some of the realistic changes I could see happening.
Nick?
Am I taking more of the fantasy route, or do you want slight adjustments?
You do you, man.
All right,
We've sort of danced around the edges of both here. So.
All right. So, no, look, I think in terms of realistic adjustments, I'd be starting Fran Karacic at right back. I think Atkinson had a tough day at the office. I think you go with Karacic at right back in this game. Trent Sainsbury, for me, comes into the starting lineup for Kai Rolls. And I'd go Milos Degenek as well, I think, for Bailey Wright. I know Degenek isn't playing much, but again, if we're using the logic of everyone else not playing much and that is getting minutes, I think Degenek should play. In midfield, I think this is an interesting one. Look, if we're going the fantasy route, I would love to see Dennis Jonro starting. Is it going to happen? I doubt it very, very highly. But I think I would like to see, this is a tough one because, again, I think Riley McGree would be a good option, but I'm thinking the realistic route, Jackson Irvine's going to start, isn't he? He's going to play. I think the only change that I could actually see happening, I wouldn't be surprised if Aaron Mooy doesn't start. Josh, I heard you mention it earlier about him backing up. I wouldn't be surprised if, maybe they look to freshen things up in midfield. But you know what the thing is, right? I can so see this happening. And this is nothing against him personally, but I shudder at the thought of this. But I could see Kenny Dougal somehow starting this game because he's a 6 for a 6. And it's like Arnie goes, you know what? I want to play a bit more defensive. Dougal's the option that can play in that role. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. I don't want it to happen. I don't think this is the game for it, but I wouldn't be shocked. But in terms of the front three, I think that either it's got to be Marco Tilio or Owen Mobile coming in for Craig Goodwin. No, Paul, I am not going to say that. And to be honest, I'd also consider maybe making a change at the top of the line. I don't know if I'd be starting Matt Leckie. I mean, Leckie has had a bit of injury problems. Again, backing up for me, I reckon if Adam Taggart's ready to go, I'm playing Adam Taggart. If he's good, he starts this game. But to be honest, if I'm thinking about being realistic, and I wouldn't be surprised who actually starts, don't be shocked if Jamie McLaren starts this game. I just have this feeling that like Ante really liked his last little bit, and he was the first name off the bench. Like, when they were chasing the game, he was the only one that was brought on early. Like, they didn't look at anyone else, and the other two changes were made in stoppage time. I genuinely get this feeling that Jamie McLaren might actually start this game, and Leckie might actually go to the left. So, I don't know. I feel like this is a bit of a mixed bag. Like, I'd love to see Marco Tilio start. They just unleash him on Peru and just let him go for it. It'd be great. But do I see it happening? Unfortunately not.
So you're feeling good about your chances there, mate? And he pulled you aside in the dressing room and told you you'd be starting.
I'm feeling great about my chances. I'm feeling great. But yeah, I no, genuinely though, I get this feeling McLaren might actually start the next game.
I can conceivably see Mooy playing 60 minutes and getting hooked. I think that's the most likely scenario.
I would conceive. I think it's more conceivable that Mooy plays 70 to 80 minutes, but gets run over after 60.
Yeah, that's the worry. That's the nightmare scenario. And look, I think there are at least two players who obviously need to be replaced in this lineup. As I've said, I didn't think Kai Rolls was up to it. Whether Sainsbury fit or whether he's not fit, I still play Deganek as the next option. Hey, football friends. How you doing?
Hello, football friend.
We've had some cameos from family members today. That's been the running theme of the show. Nick, I don't know. I think you missed.
No.
Well.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, Joe. Hi, Freya.
I think you missed Ante's dad's cameo at the start.
I had it open on my phone for those first few seconds, and I saw Ante's dad come in for a few seconds, so I did see it.
He's not coming on, guys. He's not coming on. Yeah, like, bro, you think I? Nah, man, that's not happening, man.
I lost my train of thought here. Yeah, whether Sainsbury's back or whether you put Deganek in there, don't think Rolls should start. I thought Goodwin's stocks have gone down since that performance. He didn't have a good game. I know I picked him as my Johnny. Yeah, but that's the A League. That's the A League. This is international football. It's a different environment, and also just the system that Arnie was playing puts a lot of emphasis on the wingers being able to dribble in one-on-one scenarios, and Goodwin can't really do that. Whereas you saw the contrast with Boyle. So, yeah, I think you got to change him. I'd love to see Tilio, but I think it's more likely that we see Leckie out on the flank, or we see Mobile, but the other change, Atkinson at right back, I'm not too fussed whether he plays or Karacic. I think they're pretty similar level. So as we've spoken about, Atkinson's struggles were more as a result of things outside of his control than his literal one-on-one defending. I don't think I put Riley McGree in, to be honest. I mean, maybe I haven't watched enough of him recently, but I just don't think he's good enough or responsible enough defensively.
This is why I'd consider, like, let's say if he does play, you'd put Hrustic deeper and have him as that second striker playing.
Because you look at his average position maps from when he was at Adelaide, he's beyond the striker.
Yeah,
he showed us.
That's what I mean. But like, look, if you're going to play in a way that wants that side, that midfielder to be, pumping channel runs and stretching the defensive line, then he's probably the question is like he's arguably a more rounded option in comparison to Irvine, and however much people want to talk about Irvine's experience, well, he might have scored Australia's goal, but he also gave it away a few minutes later with like multiple errors in the space of 20 seconds.
At least he's there. I don't think Hrustic will even be. I don't think McGree will even be there.
Yeah, but see, this probably allows for.
I mean, how good is Hrustic? How good is Hrustic defensively though? That's my worry. Hrustic
will be like in terms of net gain, what he'd provide to the team, in defensive and attacking senses in comparison to Irvine is arguably, larger. And then you do like McGree's, deployment in such a system is also within that context of Hrustic playing deeper and allowing to influence the game in a more positive way than what Irvine would. So I guess in terms of net gain and what they both provide in comparison to each composition, I think Hrustic with McGree would arguably be the more workable scenario composition.
Just a question. I was just having a look at who didn't make the squad this morning. Was Daggers and Davidson just dropped? This is not me suggesting they're going to play, but were they just dropped on form, or were there any injury news about them not playing?
Didn't hear anything about them injury wise.
I think it was a DMP/mid.
I mean, yeah,
A lot of angry Vuck fans in your mentions.
yes, indeed. But Ante, you're a braver man than I. I think playing McGree and Hrustic, I'd be tempted to have some sort of Makaleli style kind of anchor man to try and combat that. But maybe that's me being conventional and cowardly in my thinking.
We'll see. I'm intrigued to see how it all plays out. If you were thinking about, let's say, within the realms of this squad, if you were going to go with, a McGree and Hrustic as like 2/8 in a 3-man midfield, would you it might be more feasible to play a Jugal or a genre. Like genre probably could do it, but I guess the question with Mooy is, how much gas does he have in the tank, especially in a game like this, because it will likely go to like the. I don't think it will be over, until the 90th minute.
And that gas is pretty expensive these days. So he's in the right part of the world, I suppose.
To the moon.
All right, fellas. I think that just about wraps up the show. The emergency TNC pod. We went over an hour with it, as is our
It's
brand.
still almost gone 90 minutes. We talked about one game, and we've almost gone 90 minutes.
So on brand. If you missed any of this, it'll be up on the ESPN podcast platforms before long. Thank you for your company, gentlemen, and thank you for so many of you for tuning in a totally irregular time slot with very little turnaround. Absolutely amazing, the interaction we've got today, considering. So, we really appreciate the support and everybody who asks questions, even if we disagree with you or make fun of you when your comment comes up. That's all part of the TNC experience, baby. Whatever happens on Tuesday morning.
And
we have our fingers crossed.
We cop it worse from each other in the group chat. Right.
It's funny. Everyone has started reading Ante's tone as super passive aggressive on Twitter, I've noticed, where it's like really not. It's just your brand, Ante. Everyone assumes they're getting slapped down. You need to start using tone indicators or emojis or something.
like the Elcor from Mass Effect. Just announce your tone before every slight annoyance.
Yeah, so am I like the Mark Zuckerberg, where just everyone considers me an alien or some shit?
Is it you? Did you kidnap Oliver Bazanek?
Hey, I have. Look, as part of the alien delegation, I can't say that we did or didn't abduct Oliver Bojanic and any future Australian footballers.
But so we're gonna need like the football manager kind of like, you mentioned about tone. You got like reluctant, passive, aggressive.
Put arm around shoulder.
So
Ante just picks throws water bottle every time. All right, the show's over, folks. That's all.
We'll
see you next
Mass
time.
Effect.
Go Socceroos.